Noel, the angels did say, was to certain poor shepherds in fields as they lay, in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. And they looked up and saw a star shining in the east, beyond them far, and to the earth it gave great light, and so it continued both day and night. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 and born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 born is the King of Israel.
Welcome to New Life Online, people becoming the church. My name is Brian. I'm one of the pastors here. I just want to say Merry Christmas. Glad you're here, however you're watching, locally or around the world. It's a season of giving and generosity, and our hearts are full. And so if you're like, hey, I think this is my church and I want to get involved, would you do this in the chat? Would you say, hey, I'm here and I just want to say, like, this is where I'm watching from, or maybe this is my first time, and we have somebody in the chat today who would love to not only make a connection, help get you connected to the church, but also pray with you and help meet needs with whatever you're going through this season. One of the ways we've been meeting needs is outrageouschristmas.com. You see a need and you meet a need. And we actually have an opportunity to meet a real need this week. There's a family who is in the hospital. Their baby was born 10 weeks early, and it looks like they're going to spend Christmas in the hospital with this newly born baby. And we just thought, what if we can make Christmas special for them? Wouldn't that be awesome? Outrageous in the hospital for Christmas. And so you can do this. You can go to newlife.tv/red envelope. And when you give there, you're going to help meet that need this week so that we can bring Christmas to the hospital for this family. And by the way, I just want to say thank you so much for your generosity. Because you give, you make all of this happen, not only in local communities, but online and around the world. And so thank you so much for your generosity. As you're thinking about your end of year gift, or powerful, kind of just praying about this powerful gift you would give at the end of the year, your red envelope is the way you do that. So my wife, Kayla, and I sat down. We just have been praying about, okay, God, what would you like us to give this year on top of our normal monthly giving? And so you can do that also at newlife.tv/red envelope. And if you want to just go be outrageous this week and meet needs around the world, you go to newlife.tv/Christmas and you'll see Outrageous Christmas, or just go to outrageouschristmas.com. And this week is pretty special. We have our New Life online Christmas special. And so December 22nd at 6 p.m., December 23rd at 6 p.m., and then Christmas Eve at 4 and 6 p.m. You can watch that however you're watching right now. You'll watch that then, tune in with your family, stream it, send it to family members. However you just like, we're gonna experience Christmas together. We'll have music, we'll have a beautiful and special message that I think is gonna feel powerful and poignant for this moment. So really excited to celebrate Christmas with that. With you this season. And so today we're hopping into a series called Coming Home, and we've got Wes Davis speaking a powerful message. Let's check this out.
Christmas is a huge celebration. It gets a whole month. For some of us, it gets 2. We decorate our homes with Christmas lights, fill our homes with Christmas music, and send out Christmas cards to other people's homes. We also know what it is to be anxious, to feel alone, and to be weighed down. And this weary world longs to come home. And Christmas calls us home. Christmas is the message that God is making his home among us and making a home for us. Christ wants to make his home in our hearts. For those who feel far away from God, the Spirit calls you home. For all who have come home to God, you are now sent out this Christmas alive with the love of God to make people feel at home, to say, we are family. Good news. Christmas is the joyful announcement that God's home is coming here.
Well, would you put your hands together and welcome everybody here to New Life and People Becoming the Church. My name is Wes, and it's almost Christmas. Huh? It's almost Christmas, that's right. I was actually at Starbucks, this will surprise you, having some missional conversations with people about the Lord, and getting some coffee. And as this lady came up, I hadn't seen her in maybe 5 or 6 years. And she said, hey, I got my kids signed up for your Christmas camp. Isn't that funny? That's what she called our Wonderland, Christmas camp. And I thought, that's kind of a good thing, isn't it? That's what we're doing. We're teaching kids what Christmas is about. And just 300 kids are going to be in this space, almost 200 volunteers. My wife and I will be teaching the story time for the kids. So would you pray for us? Our marriage is either about to get really good or we're going to have a hard time. But we have a big week coming up with Christmas. And I don't know if you ever wondered if what difference some of our Christmas gatherings make, but about 10 years ago, there was a young man who came to one of our Christmas Eve gatherings. He said he came because he was ready to make some different life choices. So he came to one of our gatherings, stayed for a second, and gave his life to the Lord. And not only did it change his life, it changed mine. Because now he's my son-in-law, and today my granddaughter was dedicated on this stage. So I just think that there's things that God does in our hearts when we're a little bit more open to his message. And there's something about Christmas that reminds us that God is making his home in us. That God is not waiting for us to find our way to him. Aren't you glad? but God is actually making his way to us, making his home in us, bringing us home to God. And that's really what this series has been about. We actually are doing a 1-year study of the book of Acts, and we're taking a little break. We're going to come back to that at the end of January. We're going to be just continuing to go through the book of Acts. But right now, we're taking a little bit of a time to get our hearts ready for Christmas. And we're doing this series that's called Coming Home. And there's just, am I right? Is there something about coming home that feels good? Right? Just it feels good to be, but sometimes it's hard to get home, isn't it? 2 weeks ago, I was in South Carolina. And don't feel bad for me because it was at a place called Hilton Head. Real rough place. But I was doing it for the mission of God again. We were actually at a church planting summit for the nation. And we're really just in the midst of what's going on in our nation, we're kind of believing that God's going to do something new with another generation. Don't you agree? The message doesn't change, the mission doesn't change, but do you agree that God might pour out some new wine and some new wineskins and there might be a generation that does some things differently? Is that okay? You guys okay with that? All right. This part, that part, we're working on still. So I'm at this conference or this summit, and it gets over, and so you jump on a plane to get to another place, and you stop in Charlotte, and we put our luggage all the way through, and we get on the plane, and we're on the plane coming back, and we're heading to Seattle. I'm sitting there thinking, you know what? I'm going to land. Do you ever do this? I'm going to land at about, 9 o'clock. We'll get our luggage. It takes about an hour or so once you get to your car to get all the way back over to the peninsula. And so I'm thinking, this is really looking forward to being home. I haven't seen Carrie. Carrie knows I don't do well when I'm away from her for a long time. She does pretty good. And so, right, for a little bit, and then she misses me. And so I can't wait to get home. And right around where we're over Arizona, they said on the loudspeakers, they said, we're going to need to make an emergency landing in Phoenix. I thought, oh man. And so we landed in Phoenix, and they said, okay, we need to get you off the plane. We're having a little bit of problem with the fuel tank. And you're just glad to be on the ground, right? So we're on the ground, and feeling good that we're on the ground. And so we're waiting in the airport. So it's going to be about an hour. Who believes that? And so, okay. So we're sitting, we're waiting, we're doing that. And an hour goes by, 2 hours. And then they say on there, hey, we actually... the pilot that was flying the plane, he's timed out. And so we need to get another pilot here. So they get another pilot, and then they said, okay, now we're ready. Let's everybody board. So we all board the plane. So we all get onto the plane, and now we're all on the plane, and we're sitting there. And do you ever have a feeling like something's I don't know if something's not right? They haven't told you? We're sitting there, and then all of a sudden somebody comes on the speaker and going, we're going to need to get you back off this plane and send you home, or to a hotel, because this plane's grounded until tomorrow morning. And I'm just like, haven't I seen a movie about this? We get off the plane, we go over to this counter. They're going to give us this shuttle, this pass to a hotel. And the people in line are upset. Do you ever start getting upset, not because you're upset, but people around you are upset, so you start to feel upset with them? The guy behind me was upset. He looked at the person, they were saying, we're going to get you a shuttle, we're going to take you to a hotel. And they handed him a food voucher for $12. And he said, I'll just tell you right now, this $12 isn't going to make it okay. And I remember I was standing there, I'm like, yeah. I don't know what I was going to do, but I was feeling it with him. Yeah, we need more than $12. This is at least $25. And so we in the middle of the night, it's past midnight now, you get on a shuttle, you don't know where you're going. They take you to a hotel, you get to a hotel, and now you're sleeping. I don't know what's happening. I don't know where I am, and I'm just afraid the whole night I'm going to miss the 4 o'clock pickup for the shuttle to come back. And you're coming to the airport, and I'm just like, do you guys get, over 50. I'm like walking to the airport, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And then I saw a couple of 80-year-olds doing the same thing, and then they're like, you're going to make it. And I was like, okay, we'll make it. And then, and I used the $12, but, and so we get back onto the plane, and you fly, and you get into SeaTac, and then from SeaTac, you get on a shuttle, and you head to your car, and you get in your car, and I was with a friend, so I had to drop him off. And I remember getting inside the house, coming up the stairs, putting the luggage away, laying on the bed, and I said, I'm home. I think the whole story of the Bible is that. It's about coming home. In fact, as you read through the Bible, it starts with a home in Eden that God makes, and it ends with a new heavens and a new earth, which is an eternal home. And Jesus actually said, I'm going away to a place that I can't tell you about, and but in my Father's house there are many rooms. I got to go make another place. In fact, as we begin to make our own homes, and we have towers that stretch to the sky, we want to build homes, don't we? And we even want to make God a home, but God's like, I don't live in temples made by human hands. I actually desire to live in you. It's like we're okay with God as long as he's a little bit at a distance, because why? I think it's a little bit of the shame and guilt that we feel because we know we're broken, we know we've sinned, we know we have flaws, we know we've sinned, and it isn't the message of the gospel is that God does not cringe in reaching out to us, but that he came here. Jesus told stories about coming home. One of the stories that he told about coming home is actually known as the prodigal son story in Luke chapter 15. And we call it the prodigal son story. Have you heard of that one before? If you've been around church, you've heard it many times. If you're new, you're like, what's this story? But, we call it the prodigal son. Jesus didn't call it the prodigal son story. There wasn't like, hey, guys, gather around. I'm going to tell you a story. It's called the prodigal son. It's actually not in there. Did you notice that? The word prodigal, we think it means rebellious and runaway. It actually means extravagant and wasteful. Coming from the same word of where we get prestigious. Prodigal. In fact, actually, it's not really even a story about a runaway. It's a story about a God or a father and a heart for his kids. And when Jesus goes to tell the story, he says there's a father with two sons. There's an older son and a younger son. And as we hear that story, we're like, okay, I know this one. It's the prodigal son story, maybe. Or if you're new, you're going to pick it up pretty quick. And we look at it. But do you understand, for the people he's telling the story to, they already have a context about a story with a father and two sons. Like if I were to come on stage today and say, listen, I'm going to tell you a story. There's three bears. You immediately would be like, I think I know this one, right? There's a papa bear. There's a mama bear. There's a... Okay, so you guys know that better than Scripture. Wow. And so they would have in their mind is like when Jesus goes to tell the story and says, he doesn't say this is the prodigal son story. He says, no, let me tell you a story about a father and two sons. And the reason why is he telling the story? He's telling the story because there's a group of religious people who are actually complaining. The word in the Bible that's used is the word complaining. They're complaining that Jesus is associating with sinners. He's associating with himself with the people that aren't in our circle. By the way, a church is not when Christians come together to complain about the world. That's not a church. Now, you might feel like if you're in the inside, this feels good, but it's not God's heart. If you have more than one kid, which kid do you look at and go like, I don't really like that one? How do you think God looks at humanity? Which one does God look at and say, I don't really care about that one? We do. He doesn't. So Jesus tells a story, and when he goes to tell a story, he doesn't say, here's the prodigal son story. He says, no, there's a father. Let me tell you about a father who has two sons. And when they're hearing it, they immediately go, we know this story. So what story are they thinking of? Okay, I would like to suggest something. I've never preached this message this way. I've never saw it this way. A couple months ago, I'm reading this, and it hits me because for the first time, I stopped thinking about how do I hear this story, and I started to ask the question of how are the listeners of the story hearing the story when Jesus said there's a father with two sons, and they would think, what? This is the nation of Israel. There's a father, Isaac, who has two sons, Esau and Jacob, an older son and a younger son. And I would like to suggest that Jesus in the prodigal son story is retelling the story of Jacob in a way to draw our hearts to the heart of God and bring us home. So you're like, okay, well, what's the story of Jacob and Esau? Glad you asked. In Genesis 25, it tells a story about how Isaac and Rebekah had kids. Wasn't it great to see all the families up here? Don't you agree that a church at its best is a spiritual family where everyone's loved and accepted? It says here that the time came for them to give birth, and Rebekah discovered that she had twins. Right? The first one, okay, now for the moms out there, okay? The first one of her kids was red at birth and covered with thick hair like a fur coat. Anybody, you have to raise your hand, but you had a kid and you're like, they got a lot of hair. That's a lot of hair. That's a lot of hair. And okay, so they named him Esau. Like you're like, well, Esau, we get the word, like, it's literally like red hairy one is what his name is. They're like, I don't know, let's call him that. He looks red and hairy. Then the other twin was born with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob. Okay, again, this is a culture where they're not into rhyming, they're into word play. And so the name Jacob means heel grabber, which in their culture is also deceiver. It says they named him Jacob, and Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. Okay, like imagine being 60 and you got twins. Yeah, simple. Okay. Now, let me say this. You'll notice here it says the boys grew up. Esau became a skillful hunter and an outdoorsman, but Jacob had a quiet temperament, preferring to stay at home. What you'll see is that the boys are different. Okay, so to talk to all of the, okay, I have siblings, maybe you have siblings, to talk to all the kids out there, either, you know, kids or adult, like we've grown up, we're adults now, but we still are somebody's kid. I want to encourage you to not compare yourself to your siblings. Comparison is really something that actually it hurts two people. But it's natural to do that, right? We compare ourselves with our siblings, but actually we were designed not to compete with our siblings, but complete. In fact, one of the ways that we deal with the comparison that eats at our hearts is by celebrating our siblings. You see how different they are. It says Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating the wild game, but Esau, that Esau brought home, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So can you see how they could have some family drama? The father feels connected to Esau. The mother feels connected to Jacob. Now, because the kids are different, one of the things, if you have more than one kid, okay, so if you have more than one kid, we have more than one kid. One of the things that starts to happen is you start to see their differences. Now, as a parent, you will more easily connect to the kid that's most like you. If they share your same desires, like if a kid's born and they say, you know what, I would love to watch basketball the rest of my life. I would feel connected to them. Now, some of the kids in our own home, and by the way, still pray about this, not all of our kids want to watch basketball games. We raised them in the Lord. So if a kid shares the same things that you like, there's an easier connection there. There's an easier connection. If they like things differently, it's a harder connection. Now, when they marry, now you got more kids, right? And sometimes that connection is easy, but sometimes it's not. One of the roles of parents is this: it will help the kids in not comparing themselves to each other, is to discover their God-designed giftedness. If you can find every kid has something that they're better at, and if you can help unearth their giftedness and focus not on how they're different, why can't you be like no, don't do that. But to focus on how they are uniquely wired and gifted and help them to learn how to take those gifts and then how to fully depend on God. Not on you, not on themselves. And that sometimes is a journey, you guys, of letting go. So these boys grow up. They're competing. You have Jacob's the younger, Esau's the older. In that culture, the older would get more of the inheritance. The older would have a special birthright and blessing. And Jacob wanted it. And he takes advantage of Esau, and you'll have to read the story where he's hungry. He come in from hunting. He's so famished. He's like, if I don't eat, I'm going to die, which you're not really going to die, but he thinks that. And so Jacob he has a bowl of stew, and he says, I'll give you the stew if you give me your birthright. And he sells his birthright for a bowl of stew. Can I just encourage you that temptation will always want you to make a short-term, to meet a short-term need and give up a long-term promise. So he does it. And of course, then he's mad at his brother for doing it, taking advantage of him. As his dad gets older, he's going to die. In that culture, the father has a role in that culture as like a patriarch to say a blessing over the kids. We were blessing each one of the kids. Wasn't that special? And so there's one of the roles of parents is to speak blessing over your kids. You want to give them words to rise to, not words that beat them down. And so the fathers are going to speak a blessing over these kids. And there's a special blessing that would go for the oldest. And mom knows this. And while Esau's out hunting to bring back the game to then feed his dad and then have the special meal and the blessing, mom makes a meal, dresses up Jacob like Esau. I mean, think about this. How does Jacob dress up as Esau? He actually wears animal skins on his arms. I mean, I still can't grow a beard. I'd have to put animal skin. The dad isn't sure if that's, is that you, Esau? Yes, that's me. It's not. Is that really you? He actually has to get close to him. And they'd actually put the smell of an animal on him. Like that was the cologne he wore. And so the dad gives in, not only does he get the birthright from his brother, he gets the blessing. And dad blesses him. When Esau shows up, then it hits him. And he says to his brother, he says to Esau, I can't give it to you. I gave it to your brother. And Esau is like, don't you have anything for me? How many kids feel like that some kids got more, some of the siblings got more than I did? And he wants to kill his brother. So family is the place where God teaches us to love. Why? It's because where you see the weaknesses, it's where you see the flaws the most. Easy to love somebody from a distance. A lot harder to love somebody in a family. He wants to kill him, so he runs. He's sent away by his parents to his uncle's house. He's going to go from Beersheba, which is in Israel, to, he's going to go to Haran, which is in Turkey. I'm giving you rough estimates here. It's about 500 miles. So he travels, and on the road there, early on, he has a moment where he has an encounter with God. So he's laying down, he's going away from, now he's trying to find a new home. Every kid, by the way, it's designed by God. We prayed over all these kids. I got a little bit, I started breaking up backstage and tearing up because some of these adults I remember as kids. And now they're raising theirs. Every kid is designed to be launched from your home. You don't hold on to them, you launch them out. If you launch them out, I'm telling you, they come back. We'll talk about that. So he has a moment where he's going away, and now he's in a place where he is going to spend the night. He finds a rock. He lays his head on a rock, and he has a moment where God shows up. And God says to him these words. He says, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, the God of your father Isaac, and the ground that you're lying on, I'm going to give to you. And he says, this is Genesis 28. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars of the sky. They're going to spread out. I'm going to bless you. And all the families of the earth will be blessed through your descendants. The guy's single. And God says, not only am I going to give you like I would be like, could you give me a spouse? He's like, I'm going to give you a multitude of kids that are going to bless this world. And he says to him these words. He says, in verse 15, what's more, he says, is I'm going to be with you. I'm going to protect you. He says, one day I will bring you back to this land. and I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I've promised. Jacob wakes up and says, surely I've been in the presence of God. He actually calls the place Bethel, which means house of God. So God says, listen, I know you're going away. I'm going to go with you. I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back home. And you're going to come to know me. And so you think, like, what's his experience going to be? I love his response because he says, well, actually, I don't love his response. But he says, Jacob says now to God, he says, if you'll be with me, and if you protect me, and if you do bring me back, he says, then you'll be my God. At this point, it's the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac, but not the God of Jacob. He goes to his uncle's house. Gets to his uncle's house. It's there that he falls in love with the youngest daughter. Remember, see the story. You have an older son, a younger son. An older son who gets his stuff and runs away. This shames the family, shames the father. Now he's there. And you have this, he falls in love with the youngest daughter. The uncle says, hey, you can work for me. I'm going to pay you. And he says, what should I pay you? And he says, if I work 7 years for you, I want your daughter. He worked 7 years to get the daughter. 7 years. And at the end of the 7 years, he goes into the tent to consummate the marriage. And what happens? The dad sends in the older daughter. And it's night and it's late, and I don't know what he drank. But he wakes up and he's got a surprise. He says, you tricked me. You deceived me. The deceiver's deceived. He says, well, if you work 7 more years, I'll give you my other daughter. The storyline moves forward where he, enough tension, where he actually needs to now run away from Laban's house. The sons want to kill him. He's making money off his uncle. He's got now 2 wives, 2 maidservants. The story's so messy. If you ever feel like God, like your family's too messy for God to work, you're like, read the Old Testament, you'll be fine. And as he's coming away, he's running away from Laban's house. Laban catches up to him, makes peace with Laban. But Esau now finds out he's coming home and sends an army of 400 men to come and get him. Jacob splits his family, one on this side, one on this side. If they attack them, maybe they'll survive. If they attack them, maybe they'll survive. And he himself has a moment where he goes and he's at the Jabbok River, and it's on that night that a man shows up and wrestles with him through the night. The whole night they wrestle, and he won't let go. When the other man saw that he wouldn't let go, he actually touches his hip and disables him. I don't know if that's a UFC move, but... And he's like, who are you? And he says, your name is Jacob, but it'll no longer be Jacob because now your name will be Israel. Which means he struggles with God. He wrestles with God. He fights with God. What if our whole lives, all of our struggles that we think are with humans are actually our wrestling and struggling with God to receive his love and grace for the difficulties we've been through in life? He meets Esau. They actually make peace. And he comes home. So Jesus starts his story about a father with 2 sons. And they're like, oh, we know this one. And a younger one who runs away and wastes his life and recklessly and comes to his senses as he's feeding the pigs and he's lost everything. And they probably at this point go, oh, I like this story better because Jacob made some money. We like it that the guy went away. He shamed the family. This is better. He's broke. And now he's coming home. But in this story, Jesus surprises the listeners in the same way that God met Jacob. He tells about a father that actually rolls up his robe and ties it in a knot and runs to his son and he embraces him. Doesn't wrestle with him. He embraces him, he kisses him, and says, you're my son, welcome home. This is the story of the gospel, that all of us are runaways, that all of us have been reckless and wasteful in areas of our life. But we have a God whose love is reckless, whose love is coming towards us, that it's never too late to come home. That the story actually celebrates God's love for us. And that the church is those who celebrate sons and daughters coming home. If you're here today and you've been away from God, this is a moment to come home to God. If you have a loved one who's away from God, we celebrate homecomings. We're not waiting for people to make their way back home. We're actually running alongside a Father who's running to us. The message of Christmas is that God came here, came near to us, made his home among us. And I was just like, put yourself in this story of hearing it and Jesus saying, this is Christmas. I came to you. I'm reading a book, and I'll end with this, yesterday. It's called Gentle and Lowly. It is saying about the heart. When Jesus only talked about his heart one time, he said, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. And that's the heart of God for us. And I actually wrote this down. I'll read it to you because I want to say it right. The holy and high Christ does not cringe in reaching out to us, but he takes joy in seeing people forgiven. Christ's solidarity is with his people, the sinners and the sufferers, that we descend deeper into the heart of Christ, that the very heart of Christ is drawn to us. So go to him. Open yourself up to him. Let him love you. Your anguish is his home. If you knew his heart, you would. Come home to God today. Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, we thank you for this time as we look into your scripture, as we see ourselves as those that have wandered, and as you as a God who's welcomed us home. So prepare our hearts, God, for Christmas, for the healing of families, for people coming to your kingdom. We believe in our Christmas gatherings, there's going to be lots of people come to Christ. They're going to feel God's love. But I pray here today, if you're here and God's Spirit is working on your heart, would you let him love you and embrace him in his grace? We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Would you stand?
We're singing joy to the hopeless, the hurting, the restless, and joy to the broken, searching for their home. We're singing peace on the earth, goodwill to every man. We're singing joy, joy, joy. A time to remember, God gave us his son. King in a manger, the star up above. Angels singing, hope is ringing, the sound of heaven come down, singing joy to the hopeless, the hurting, the restless, joy to the broken, searching for their home. We're singing peace on the earth, goodwill to every man, singing joy, joy, joy. Rejoice, rejoice, hope has come, glory and peace, wrapped in love. Rejoice, he is here, King of heaven, came to be near. Singing joy to the hopeless, the hurting, the restless, joy to the broken, searching for their home. We're singing peace on the earth, goodwill